So when we talk about success, which is this whole series, one of the challenges with talking about success is we all define it just a little bit different. Like, I think there's nobody in the room that doesn't want to have a life of success. The thing is, we just want to be successful at different things. Right? For some of us, we're going to measure success like Moses. It's your tennis shoes. It's how strong your shoe game is. Some of us are going to measure it by our physique, some of it by our income, some of it by our zip code, some of us spiritually. There's all different ways that we tend to measure success, which is why I think we all want to experience some level of success. We just tend to look for it in different places, but we all want it. I've yet to meet the person that wants to be the poster child for failure. They're like, I just want my life to matter for nothing, and I want to fail at everything. Like, that person just doesn't exist. But the problem is, who gets to define what success is? Like, since there's a different way that we all tend to pursue it, and we tend to quantify it, who gets to define what success is? For our lives, for your life, is there a universal? Is there a standard? Why does it seem to be so elusive, and it comes maybe for other people, but not for us? And then here's a question that's going to really drive us for this whole series. Is it possible that even in the pursuit of success, that we can succeed at things in life that don't matter? Like, typically when we think of success, we juxtapose it to failure. There's either success or there's failure. But what if, in fact, there are forms of success that are failure themselves? One of the most disruptive quotes I've ever heard came from a man named Francis Chan. He's a pastor, he's an author. On your screen, Francis Chan once asked this question: our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter. Followed up with, so are we living lives that matter? And so I think part of the challenge for a series like this is to even figure out what in the world is success. Because if we're going to avoid living a life for things that don't matter, we need to know what does. We need to know what success actually is so that we can avoid having either a life that we would go, man, I didn't make a difference, I didn't hit the mark, or even one that at the end we go, nailed it, but it was all the wrong things. I succeeded, but I still failed. So here's what I'd love you to do just for a minute. Help me maybe get the content stirring a little bit this morning before I even go any further. And I want you to just turn to somebody next to you. I'm only going to give you about 30 seconds to do this. And I would love you to ask this question: what is success? And see if together, in 5 words or less, can you answer that question? So, go. Some of you are like, well, my measure of success is not being bothered on Sunday morning and having to talk to somebody next to me. Thanks a lot. Clearly, there's a lot of different ways that we can answer that question. So let me pray and ask that God in his wisdom would be so good as to speak to us and maybe help us hone in a little bit clearer on what it means for us to live a life that matters. So Jesus, I just come before you and acknowledge you as King, as Lord, as President in this place. And God, even thinking of the lyrics that Lauren sang a moment ago, give us Jesus, give us you. I do pray that that would be the outcry of our hearts this morning. Whether we would admit this morning and confess that we believe there is a God and that you're him, or whether we're trying to figure that out and we don't know what to do with some of the rumblings we do feel in our hearts, some of the frustrations, the discouragement, the doubt. God, wherever we are on a spectrum, I do pray that you would pull something on the chords of our heart in such a way that the cry of our lives would be, give us Jesus. Nothing else matters. You are the only one. And so, God, I pray that you would help make sense of your word that you gave us. You gave this book to us to lead us, to guide us, to correct us, at times even to rebuke us. So, God, would you allow it to do its good work through the power of your Holy Spirit, to be able to help guide us to deeper understanding of who you are, who we are, and what it looks like for us to walk in rhythm of life with you. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, we're going to take a quick minute, and if you're a regular here at Ridge Point, you know it's part of what we do. We're going to take up our offering together which is a part of what it means for us to be a community. Just like any family that contributes to the causes of the family, part of the cause of this family is to continue to serve our region, to serve our world in the good deeds and in the good news of Jesus. There's a lot of ways that we do that. This isn't the only way, but this is an important way that we get it done. So we got people that are going to come forward. They're going to pass around some buckets. You can also, if you like, you're like, I don't do cash. Well, most of us don't. We've got online ways that you can give as well. But there's just a reality that so much of what God has enabled us to do is born out of the generosity and the obedience of his people. And this is moments where we're able to say, God, we trust you with what you have given us, and so we give part of it back. But it's also a moment, not just to say we trust you, but it's a moment to say we're responding to you. Like, you ask us to trust you. So we're not just saying we do trust you. We're being obedient to say, God, use this, take this, multiply this. In the same way that, honestly, Jesus once took the small gifts of the boy with the fish and the loaves, multiplied it, fed thousands of people. This is what we ask him to do with the gifts that we give, and this is why we give, and this is what we see him constantly do over and over and over again, is take what we're able to give back, multiply it in its impact and its effect to reach people for Jesus. So to those of you that are part of this moment and a part of this kind of life part of what it means to be involved in Ridgepoint, I just want to say thank you. And to those of you that are not, would love to have you join us and just invite you in to what it means to be a part of a family that has a mission. So I heard a couple years ago, I heard a story that for me has always kind of embodied what it means and what it looks like to live a life, as Francis Chan said, being successful in things that don't matter. So the story comes at the end of World War II. It's a Japanese soldier by the name of Haru Anoto. And right near the end of the war, a little bit less than a year before the war was up, Haru was a part of a small tactical force that was dropped into the Philippines jungle. And part of what their assignment was guerrilla warfare against any of their enemies. And so they were trained and they were good at being able to come in, ambush, run back, and hide, and nobody could find them. Very small, but very elite group. And so they would attack military sites, they would attack military personnel, they would attack transit lines, they would attack areas where food was being grown. I mean, whatever it was that they could do to disrupt the war, this is what they did, and they became very good at it. They became so good at it, as a matter of fact, that when the war ended, nobody could find them. Like, they could not find them to get them out and let them know that the war was over. And so what began to happen then over the next several years is that they continued to function as if the war was still going on, fulfilling their mission. They would go into villages, into towns, into cities at night, usually under the cover of darkness. They would attack, they would thwart. There were even some horrific things that they did, thinking that they were still in a state of war. And so their government, Japan, tried to figure out how to get them out, and they attempted many things. They would send people in to look for them, couldn't find them. They would drop leaflets over the jungle, and they got some of these, as a matter of fact. As the story was unfolding years and years later, they would get these leaflets that said, the war is over, come out of hiding, addressed specifically to them. But this small group of men that were a part of this team, they came to believe it was all propaganda. It was an attempt to get them out of hiding so that the enemy could then attack them. And so they just dismissed all of it as nonsense. This would go on for 30 years. For 30 years, to the point that Haru would eventually lose all of the people with him. Some that were lost in the fighting, some that just succumbed to disease and to the reality of living for 30 years out in the wilderness with no resources. But they were known. Even though nobody knew who they were or where they were, for 30 years, they were a presence in this area of the Philippines. People just knew there were places you don't go. It was dangerous. They knew that there was this group that was coming out, creating mayhem, murder, and chaos, but nobody could find them. And then there was a small group of reporters and historians that decided they were going to set out to the task. A few military personnel, even from Japan, joined the group, and so they went on a hunt, and they actually found Haru. At this point, he was all that was left of his group. And the reporter that found him ended up convincing him enough that the war might be over that he agreed that should his commanding officer from World War II come tell him himself, then he would believe the message. So believe it or not, his commanding officer was still alive. They were able to get him to the Philippines, create an interaction where they talked together, and he convinced him that, in fact, the war was over. So as they got him to come out of the woods, he ends up meeting with the government. And I don't know if this picture came up. There's a scene of him actually handing over his sword 30 years later as a sign of surrender. Now, when he went back to Japan, you can only imagine that 30 years later, he entered a very different Japan than the one that he left when he was a young man. I believe when he went into the service, he was 19 years old. I mean, my son's 22, so I can't even imagine. 19, he goes in, the way that his brain had just been brainwashed himself a little bit, and he's on this war, and he comes out, and he goes back to Japan, and Japan is not the same place he left. So a short time living in Japan, he's super disillusioned, decides to move to Brazil. So he moves to Brazil, he meets a woman, he gets married, he actually starts a cattle ranch, he becomes a rancher for a few years, but he stays in touch with Japan. Stories, even friends that he had back in Japan, he's hearing all the time things that are still going on. And then there's this one story a few years after living in Brazil that comes to his attention of a young boy, high school age, don't know the details, but gets in an argument with his parents and decides that the conclusion to solve the argument is to murder his parents. So he does. Well, Haru hears the story and is moved by it and decides that the Japan he loves is no longer in existence and he has to do something about it. So he leaves Brazil and he actually moves back to Japan. And when he moves back to Japan, he becomes like a local dignitary at one point. He becomes a community servant. But the thing that he did the most before the end of his life was he began these outdoor camps called the Anoto survival camps. And he led these camps and started these camps specifically to target and to serve under-resourced, marginalized, on the fringe, hurting teenagers. Probably thinking through his own lenses a little bit of his life and what led him down the journey that he went on and wanting to help do whatever he could to spare some other kids maybe of a life as well of tragedy like he had experienced. Now here's how I tell you that story, because it's always made me wonder how many people today are living a life a little bit like Haru? And you could dismiss it and go, none of us, because you would only measure it by the extremeness of a world war, attack, and murder, and mayhem, and hiding in the wilderness. But take some of the extreme details out. Here's the detail to focus on. There's a young man that spent 30 years of his life living for success that didn't matter. And he was doing all the things that would have been successful had they been at war. Following orders, staying his post, thwarting the enemy. But all that ended less than a year into it. And for the next nearly 30 years, everything he did not matter. And not only did it not matter, because he lived a life for things that so much didn't matter, it became lethal. Cost him the lives of his companions, and they cost the lives of countless others. And I wonder if Haru had stayed in that jungle and never gotten out, would he have ever known the greater calling that his life was destined for, which was, I believe, to create these camps that would serve these young children, other men and women, young boys and young girls that needed to be cared for, have an arm put around them, and to be taught that there is something more for their own life to live for. And I wonder how many of us could possibly be living our lives in a similar way right now. Like your bullseye of success, even if you're nailing it, if you were to sit down right now face to face with Jesus, he would go, hey, it's not bad, but in the end, it's rust and dust and it just doesn't matter. And some of us far too easily can pursue a life that by the standards of this world is successful, and yet in the end, miss the higher calling that God has for us. And so I think there are times in life that we have an opportunity, an invitation actually, to reevaluate, are we living our life for what really matters? We get these little invitations through experiences in life. Some of them are tragic, like the funerals. Like when you go to a funeral, it happens all the time. There's this momentary reset, right? Where you're sitting there and you're saying goodbye to somebody, whether tragically or a life lived long and well, but it gives us a moment to go, what do I want my life to matter for? What do I want my life to count for? Is my life counting for what should matter and what does matter? And we have these horrific moments, we have these tragic moments that help us reset. We also just have normal moments, like big changes that we go through in life. I mean, my life, the last couple of years has been nothing but change and transition. A couple of years ago, and some of you are already gotten ahead of me on this one, but when our son got married, to be 2 years in this June and moved out, I was not prepared for the feeling every time I walked past his bedroom after he moved out. I think it was 6 months before I could stop getting choked up, but that started to help me reframe a little bit. Like, okay, I'm in a different place of life. This big change is making me ask different questions. Or right now, like Nicole and I mean, we're married almost 30 years. We're going through more change right now than we have ever gone through. moving and the church and I mean, everything. Matter of fact, I was at Costco yesterday on the other side of the state before I drove out here. And I'm picking up a couple of things that I need to get to the new house. And I start getting all weepy at Costco. And I'm like, we won't have our Saturday routine at Costco together with the free things and the getting basically robbed but freely giving my money away. I'm like, I walked out of Costco and I'm like, why am I crying at Costco? I even told my wife last night when she got to the house, I was like, I got weirdly weepy at Costco. She's like, there's a Costco over here too, right? I was like, I know. But it's creating this momentary kind of pause for us that it's forcing me to ask questions that in the fast-pacedness of life, we don't usually stop to ask. Like, is my life really mattering right now? I'll tell you two questions that I'm asking differently at this particular moment of so much change and transition is, number one, is what am I not doing right now in my life that 5 years from now I'm going to really regret? That if I could talk to me 5 years from now, me would come back and go, dude, what are you doing? I'll give you one quick example. My wife actually brought it up to me again just last night. I have had for years now, I've had a vision to write a book that's been born out of some of my own experiences in life and something that I really feel like God put on my heart at one point. Because I don't want to write a book just to write a book. I feel like God really said, hey, here's something that could really be beneficial to people as it's been beneficial to you. And I just keep punting on it. I've gotten, I think, 100 pages in and I've just stopped because I've got so many other things. I keep coming up with all the excuses to punt. And I'm thinking, I don't want 5 years from now to go, I didn't do that. And this is a moment where I'm asking more than ever, what are the things I need to be focusing my life in? I'm also asking right now, God, what are the things about me that have to be different 5 years from now? Like, I don't want Craig 5 years from now to look like Craig right now. There are things about how I love my wife that I want to get better. There are things about how I serve people that I want to get better at. There are things about how I pursue Jesus that I want to be different and better. And I don't want to get 5 years from now and go, I'm the same that I was 5 years ago. But these are questions that I feel like are being stirred because, so we have these moments, right? Moments, whether it's change or whether it's tragedy. I'll tell you one of the moments that in our world I think was the biggest opportunity, and in many ways, as awful as it was a gift. And it was a gift of the whole planet to kind of pause and ask some of these questions, and it was COVID, frankly. There's an article that was written by New York Times and Forbes. And the title of the article was, What Will Success Look Like Post-Pandemic? So they wrote this article right near the end. We're still in the pandemic and in COVID, but it wasn't quite over, but it was getting to the tail end. We could see the end in sight. Pretty extensive article on how that had impacted all of us and how it could potentially impact us in the days to come. I just want to read a couple of paragraphs from that article. It said, the pandemic provided the world with an opportunity to take time out and reflect on what truly matters. It's even what brought on the onslaught of the Great Resignation, where some of you maybe are a part of that, where you just decided in the middle of COVID, man, this job and the way it just sucks the life out of me and being frustrated every day, this is not what I want to do. And so many people during COVID quit their jobs and decided they were going to do something else. And it says here, only a few years ago, we would have said, success means earning a lot of money, or having a big house, or nice cars, or traveling around the world, a summer home in the Hamptons, and all of the trappings that signify you've, quote unquote, made it. Success, at least for a moment, isn't defined solely by our bank account or our investment portfolios. In fact, people are starting to reflect on what they want to do with their professional lives and their personal lives in a different way. We're collectively questioning everything. There seems to be a consensus that we don't want to just go back to how things used to be and how we used to define success. COVID has made us contemplate our lives differently. This entails what type of person we want to become, the job or career that offers satisfaction and a sense of purpose and meaning. Most people have come to the conclusion that our life here on this earth is precious and fleeting. And since we only have a limited time here, it's important to make the best of it. And so the question on the other side of COVID will be, did we do it? Will we collectively redefine success to be a life lived for things that really matter most? So that's my question. Did we do it? And I would suggest to you that we started to. I think there's a point that we really started to. With all the crazy that our world went through, it was the gift and the horror of the moment. is that we started to ask, all right, who do we want to be? What do we want to be? What do we want to do? What matters? What doesn't matter? Who matters? And we started to ask better questions. But then things started to go back to normal. And we did what we do, me included. We went back to normal. And I think we stopped asking some of the better questions that we were asking during COVID. And I think, in many regards, we may have missed the opportunity that it provided for us, many of us, to reset our lives around the things that matter most. Because all we wanted was things to get back to the way that they were. But the problem is, even when you start talking about success, none of us can figure out how to agree on it or define it. You even go to Webster. Here's how Webster defines success. Someone or something that is successful. A person or a thing that succeeds. I could have wrote that. Like, I always thought as a kid we were taught you can't define a thing with a thing. That's what Webster did. You only define a thing with a thing when you know nothing about the thing, right? So here's part of the problem. Even at a professional level, like, we don't know what success is. We can't even put a definition to it. Thankfully, we do have common language in the form of an analogy that we all understand when it comes to success. That analogy, we usually refer to it this way. We call it climbing the, help me out, climbing the ladder. Climbing the ladder. So this is how we tend to at least come around some form of shared understanding of what success is that we term it with this idea of climbing the ladder. And it starts really young, right? So this is a stool that a friend of ours made for my son Tobin just after he was born. Those are actually his feet that are on there. So this was his stool. And this was how he, when he was a little kid, this is how he got up to the sink, all right? I think it's built pretty sturdy. You know, so this was his way of getting up to the sink. And when you're a kid, like, we start with an idea of wanting to move up the ladder from the time we're super young. And this is where it begins for some of us. Literally, I just want to be able to see over the sink. Well, he's 6'1" or 6'2" now, so that's not a problem anymore. But it begins at a very young pursuit. But then we start getting older, and the ladders get a little bit bigger. And they become defined at some point, not just by what we can do, but also by what we can acquire. And it starts to become not just who we are, but what we get. When you're in elementary school, then when you're in high school, we start developing different analogies or different definitions of what moving up the ladder looks like. I remember when I was a kid, I don't know how young, but G.I. Joe and Star Wars were the thing. Anybody ever have the not the battleship, but the big giant 5-foot-long aircraft carrier, G.I. Joe? Yeah, your life wasn't as successful either then, I guess, because I didn't get it either. My parents were like, yeah, we don't make that kind of money. But, I mean, that was, as a kid, man, if you had the aircraft carrier, you went up a couple of rungs at one time. But this is what we try to do. We try to figure out from our social groups to what we have, to what we wear. And then the thing is, as we continue to get older, the ladder just gets bigger. Because then it becomes our neighborhood that we live in, the car that we have, the spouse that we marry. And so we get this idea that to really succeed in life, we just got to keep moving up and up and up and up the ladder. Thus comes what I will refer to all morning long as this. It is the lie of the rungs. And here's the lie of the rungs. Nobody starts out going, I need to go from here, wham, and just jump to the top. But we do believe this. I just need to go one rung higher. And if I can just get one rung higher, then life will be good. And here's the crazy thing. You can actually, in certain fields, you can actually get to a point where you get all the way to the top of the ladder. I think about movie stars. I mean, there's probably not too many other examples of people that in many regards, they've gotten to the top of the ladder. They're famous, they're known, they've got money, people want their opinion, they want their presence at the parties. Like that's kind of the all kit and caboodle. And yet I read a quote. I'm going to step down just a little bit. Some of you, I think you're getting nervous. You nervous? Yeah. Hold it, Mose. Don't let it shake. A couple years ago at the Golden Globe Awards, Jim Carrey was asked to present the award. And this is what Jim Carrey said as a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I think, to call out the insanity of the whole thing on your screens. He said, "Thank you. I am two-time Gold Globe winner Jim Carrey. You know, when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. Thank you. I am two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey going to get some well-needed shut-eye. And when I dream, I don't just dream any old dream. No, sir. I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey." Now, here's where he kind of changes a little bit of direction. I think this is where he tries to call the room out a little bit, because then I would be enough. It would finally be true. And I could stop this terrible search for what I know ultimately won't fulfill me. Said from a man at the top of the ladder. Now, some of you might go, so what are you saying? I shouldn't succeed at anything in life? I shouldn't accomplish anything? No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, first of all, this is a room of a lot of very accomplished people that have done a lot of incredible things, acquired a lot of incredible things. It's not at all that I would say you shouldn't have done those things or have those things, accomplish those things, or climb those ladders. As a matter of fact, it's going to seem a little bit insane, but I'll tell you this. I think maybe we don't set our sights high enough. C.S. Lewis would once say this on your screen. It would seem that our Lord finds that our desires are not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea, we are far too easily pleased. So here's what I would say. This isn't about, hey, shame on you if you've acquired things or accomplished things. This isn't, you shouldn't climb the ladder. No. It's climb the right one. Because far too often, according to Jim Carrey, you can actually climb some of the highest ladders and realize at the top it's been leaning against the wrong wall. And I think part of what Lewis is saying is lean it against the right wall. So you go to the Bible, and one of the pictures that we get in the scriptures is one of the most accomplished, successful, wealthy kings and the man named Solomon to have ever existed. And Solomon's whole pursuit in one place of the Bible, the book of Ecclesiastes, is to measure whether or not he can climb high enough or an amount enough of ladders to achieve some sense of success and fame and satisfaction and pleasure and joy that is sustainable and soul-drenching on this side of eternity. Now, before Solomon became king, there's a recorded conversation with him and God where he actually makes a request, not for all of that stuff, but for wisdom. In his kingship, he doesn't say, hey, make me wealthy, give me things, give me power. He just says, give me wisdom. Here's the moment in the interaction. I want you to see it because it sets the direction for what God does for him. 1 Kings chapter 3 says this, and so God said to him, since you have asked for this being wisdom, and not for long life or wealth, not for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. And I will give you a wise and discerning heart so that there will never be anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your life and in your lifetime, you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and my commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life. So God makes good on his promise. And not only does he give him the wisdom he asks for, but he makes him the wealthiest, most renowned, most accomplished king, not only in his lifetime, but in many ways you measure him against anyone to date, and he still measures up. You talk about just wisdom. In the Bible alone, there's at least 1,000 recordings of wise sayings from Solomon that have been passed down now for generation after generation after generation to the point that we still read them, are reoriented by them. There are also wise sayings and wisdom sayings outside of the Bible collected in other books that came from him. There were people, kings, queens, rulers of other lands that would travel from far just to come sit in front of him and let him give counsel to their situations, to their kingdoms. He ruled and reigned over his own kingdom with wisdom, solving problems and disputes and issues that nobody else knew what to do with. I mean, God really did grant him a supernatural level of just discernment and wisdom. And then wealth, I mean, there was nobody that compared. Matter of fact, there is one thing in Solomon's kingdom that he was ever rumored to run short of, and it's wood. And he ran short of wood because of all the trees they had to cut down. Trees they had to cut down to make wheelbarrows to carry his jewels and gold. Like, that's the only thing he ever ran short of because he was so wealthy. And then there was accomplishments. This guy went on to accomplish things that even today there are certain things that he laid his hand to, that he set in direction, that architects are still studying today. Some of his accomplishments include forts, cities, ports, mines, highways, shipyards, and he also was accredited for building the first temple in Jerusalem. And then if you know Solomon's story, you also know that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That was not part of what God promised him. He added that one to the list. But this guy did everything from being wise and having money and having power and having status and having achievement. And then I think it's safe to say he was also the most relationally sex-driven king of his era, if not every era as well. Point is, this guy climbed every ladder there was to climb. He climbed ladders that you and I won't even ever know throughout the life that we live exist. But he climbed them. He climbed every one in an attempt to say, if I get to the top of that one, or maybe all of them, will I find success of the things here in this world? In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, this was his conclusion of everything. The words of the teacher, the son of David, the king of Jerusalem. Verse 2, just say it. Would you read verse 2? There's your boost of joy for the day. Right? The whole rest of the book, in all honesty, if you read through it, it reads a little bit like a 1990s emo artist. A little bit dark, a little bit depressive, a little bit cynical. But he just goes through an honest evaluation of, okay, is there anything at the top of these ladders? And he climbed every single one of them. And he said at the end, meaningless. I got to the top. And it was meaningless. And he would go on and he would say this. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Memorize that phrase, under the sun. It's important. Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, and it hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is never full. To the place that streams come from, they return again. All things are wearisome. More than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And so Solomon, as you read through Ecclesiastes, like he literally does set out for every ladder he can get a hold of and tries to climb them. And his conclusion is, if your life is aimed at just trying to get to the next rung, and the next rung, and the next rung, you will end your life very meaningless. Now, some translations take the word meaningless from the Hebrew and they translate it as the frustrating. So even if you wouldn't go so far as to say meaningless, maybe you would at least admit this morning that life could be very frustrating. Yes? And here's why so often life is frustrating, if we're honest with ourselves, because of the lie of the rungs. So much of the frustration of life is the belief that we have to get from here to here, and it's in between is the frustration. And then compounding that frustration is when we actually get to the next rung and realize, crud, now I need to get to the next one. And so the opportunity today, it's to hear the cry to come out of the woods. But here's what I also know is true. This will probably make sense to most of us. And there will be, for all of us, I would assume, at some point this morning, there will be agreement with me. But many of us, you're going to go back into the woods like Haru at the end of the day. It's just the reality, because the lure of the ladder is powerful. And some of us will sit here today and go, you're right, I don't want to be living just to get to the next rung, but you're going to go back out in a couple hours, in a couple of days, and we're going to go right back to the rungs. It's going to tempt me to do it. It's going to tempt you to do it. So here's what we have an opportunity to do instead, is to listen to the cry to come out of the woods and not spend 30 years wasting our life. We could listen to a guy like Solomon that actually climbed the ladders that all of us still try to climb. There's no ladder he climbed that doesn't still exist in our time, in our world, in our culture. Now, we can ignore him and go, I don't care, I'm going to try it myself. Okay, then the pain will be your own. Or we can go, hey, maybe part of wisdom for us is to listen to somebody that actually stood up there and what it is he concluded about it. So I just want to look at 3 quick ladders that I think Solomon climbed. There were more than 3, but they are 3 of the prominent ladders that I think we still try to climb today. Ladders that I promise you, you go back out into this world and it will tell you in an instant, these are the ladders where success is found. Ladder number 1, no surprise, the ladder of money. The ladder of money. Now, with any king, there's a few things that would symbolize his kingship. How successful it was, how powerful he was. Just like you and I, with our money, we put our money towards the things that represent, that show. It might be the neighborhood, it might be the house, it might be the car, it might be the second house, but there are things that when we are pursuing money, when we're believing that it's just another rung of finance, there are ways that we reflect, hey, I've made it, I'm more than, I'm moving up the ladder. Same thing was true for a king, and a lot of that was reflected in their throne. A king's throne was not just a place to sit, it was a place of prominent power. It was a place to portray to the world, hey, here's who I am, and here's who you're not. And Solomon had an incredibly impressive throne. One, as a matter of fact, that traveled with him everywhere that he went. So a little bit of description of this throne. It had 6 steps that would take you from the bottom of it up to where you finally sat down. So it was very clear. Every time Solomon was on his throne, if you looked at him, you had to look up and he had to look down right away, signifying, hey, I'm above you, I've made it, look at the power and the wealth that I've established. But as he walked up the steps, every step was lined on one side with a golden eagle and on the other side with a golden lion that faced each other. I was reading that this week and I was wondering if that's a little bit of a prophecy for the Super Bowl next year, eagle lion facing off, we'll see. But he would climb up this, and I want you to listen. I'm going to read this because it's pretty intense. This is a description of his throne. There were a series of mechanical tricks that would allow that when the king reached the first step, an ox would stretch its leg out, on which Solomon leaned, and a similar action would then take place in the case of the animals on each of the 6 following steps. From the 6th step, the eagles raised the king and placed him in his seat, near which a golden serpent laid coiled. And when the king was seated, the large eagle then placed a crown on his head. The serpent would uncoil itself, and the lions and the eagles moved upwards to form a shade over top of him. A dove would then descend, take the scroll of the law of the ark, and place it on Solomon's knees. When the king sat to judge the people, the wheels began to turn, and the beasts and the fowls began to utter their respective cries, which frightened those who had intended to bear false witness to the king. Moreover, while Solomon was ascending the throne, the lions would scatter all kinds of fragrant spices. So, let me just suggest, if you have a custom-made lazy boy out of gold that throws incense on you when you sit down and growls at your children when they lie to you, you probably have money to waste, right? At least to spare. Like, this guy had money to, again, remember, only thing he ever ran short of was what? Wood, right, because he had to cut down all the trees to make wheelbarrows to carry all of his jewels and his coins. Like, this guy had no shortage of money and things to spare when it came to it. And this is his conclusion on your screen. Book of Ecclesiastes chapter 5. This is what he says of money. Those who love money will never have enough. You know, so great. Because we all probably go, I don't love money. I just see its purpose. I see its value. Do you know how you know if you love it? Do you feel like you have enough of it? Because this is what Solomon says. If you feel like you don't have enough of it, you probably have too much love for it. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. Again, hear this from the man that had more money than you and I will ever have. The more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. So what good is wealth? Except perhaps to watch it slip through your fingers. People who work hard sleep well, whether they eat little or much, but the rich seldom get a good night's sleep. There's another serious problem I've seen under the sun. Hoarding riches harms the saver. Money is put into risky investments that turn sour, and everything is lost. And in the end, there is nothing left to pass on to one's children. We all come to the world, to the end of our lives, naked and empty-handed as the day that we were born. We can't take our riches with us. Again, nothing is life-shatteringly new in that. Nobody went, we come to the world naked? No, I mean, we can't take it with us. We come with nothing. We know that, but do we know it? Because I think that there is a different message, a very different message in our world and in our culture that would tell us the opposite. And far too often do we fall victim to it. A study I read a couple years ago that I found super interesting. The study took a range of people that made from $1,200 a year up to, so I don't know, like junior high working at a gas station, I don't know, but $1,200 a year, however much that was, to a person making $120,000. And the question that they asked everybody along the spectrum was, how much more money do you need to alleviate your current financial burdens? What was really interesting about this study is nobody gave the exact same dollar amount. You ready for this? Everybody gave the exact same percentage. And you know what it was? 10%. Nobody said, I need to go from here to here. I need $1 million. We'll change it all. They said, I just need a rung. I need one more rung. But the problem is, the person that was already one more rung higher, what did they say? Well, I just need one more rung. And the person that was at that rung, what did they say they needed? Well, I just need one more rung. Again, this is the lie of the ladder. That we just need to get one more rung higher and it will satisfy us. It's not lost to me either that when you look at the scriptures and God talks about money, and part of what he instructs us to do with it as his followers is to release a portion of it to him. Where does that start? What percentage does that begin with? 10. Isn't that weird? This is not a giving message. There's going to be no another tithe that happens at the end of the day, no offering coming back around. But here's what I find very interesting, is that the instruction of the Creator is, when you follow me, I want you to release at least 10%. And yet there is something in contrast to that, embedded into the human heart that says, no. I actually just need 10% more. You want to learn how to start getting free of the grip of money? You got to learn first how to start loosening your grip on it. And God's not asking for all of it. He's not saying, give me everything. He's saying 10%. And I think it's just fascinating that somewhere inside of us the belief is, if I just add 10% more. And Solomon says, I did. And guess what? It was meaningless. It's not just the ladder of money, though. It's also the ladder of accomplishment, which looks different for all of us, because all of us want to get to the end of our lives and have accomplished something different, whether it's the family we build, whether it's the job, the portfolio that we had, whether it's our hobbies that we had and how we did. Like, we all have these different things that we want to accomplish. Well, Solomon was the same, and he set out up that ladder. Again, back to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 2, this is what he says. Verse 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks. I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs, water groves, and flourished trees. Skip over verse 11. And yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and that I had toiled to achieve, everything was, say it again, what? It was a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. What a fascinating analogy. He says, even trying to climb that ladder of achievement, it was like trying to catch the wind. You're just never going to do it. Not if your desire is, if I achieve enough up the ladder, then I'll feel success. If you're placing all of your hope for success, for that sense of peace and self-worth and validation of your existence and the ladder, and the higher you can move up it with all of your accomplishments, my kids will know I did this, my grandkids will know I did this. He says, this is what Solomon says, meaningless. You're going to live a very frustrated, frustrating, potentially meaningless life. And this is why we've seen the story over and over again of people that have gotten up to the top of the ladder. Athletes, politicians, you fill in the blank. People that in their respective field have gotten all the way up the ladder and then end up taking their lives. And everybody's just dumbfounded, like, what? They had everything. No, they didn't. They fell victim to believing that everything's up there. And so they got up there and they realized there's nothing here. So much so that they didn't even want to live anymore. My wife and I watched a friend take his own life in the last couple of years who was genuinely a pro in his field. Somebody who had arrived at the top. And when your life is lived to get to the top, when you get to the top, you find out it feels more like the bottom than the top. And so Solomon comes back and concludes, the ladder of accomplishment and success, meaningless. And so the last ladder that he tried to pursue, that I still think many of us do as well in our world, and maybe even uniquely so in our culture in the West, is this. It's the ladder of pleasure and image. Go back to the book of Ecclesiastes, and this is what Solomon says. Chapter 2, verse 1. I said to myself, come now, and I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and I embraced folly. My mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for the people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Verse 10, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, and I refused my heart no pleasure. And yet meaningless. Like literally, here's a guy that says, if I saw it, I got it. Whatever pleasure he wanted. Whether it was a party he wanted to throw, a thing he wanted to build, a person he wanted to sleep with, he denied himself no pleasure. And he said, you know what, at the end, it was the same as every other ladder I climbed up. It was meaningless. And my concern is there are still some of us in this world that believe that it's going to be a mix of pleasure and image that's going to finally make us feel like we've arrived. And I don't mean pleasure even in just the vices of the world. It could be the good things. The right vacation, the right stuff, the right experiences, the right hobby, it's just the pleasures of life. If I can just have that experience, if I can live more in that experience, then I'll feel like I've accomplished something more. And Solomon says, everything I wanted that I could see with my eyes, I ingested it. And it did nothing. Or even just status, an image. I mean, this was a guy, everybody was reading his books, listening to his podcast, reading his blog. They wanted his opinion, wanted to be his friend. They wanted him at their parties. Like, he had the image. He was the man. And still of that, he said at the end, it meant nothing. It was meaningless. All people wanted was to take from me what I had. And I think this is one that is a unique struggle even for our world. You know, there's a study that was put out by Lego a couple years ago. I think in an attempt to figure out what new toy to build. And they interviewed adolescent kids in both China and the United States. They asked them one simple question. What do you want to be most when you grow up? China, the answer was overwhelmingly an astronaut. Do you know what the answer was in America? Social media influencer. Y'all, we got a problem. And listen to me, this is not just with our kids. It's you and I as well. Because we love to go online and post all the right images, but hide back the real version. We're so caught up in making people believe something that's a little bit better about our reality than is true. Because if people believe that my family's got their stuff together, believe that my kids are all perfect, believe the post and the image they see online, then there's a sense of arrival and achievement in their eyes and through their approval. Solomon says, been there, done that, had that, meaningless. If that's where you're looking for a sense of self-worth, validation, purpose, and success, meaningless. And we could keep going on. Like we could add ladder after ladder after ladder after ladder, and the result would be the same. You get to the top, and if the ladder is what defines success, you're never going to find it up there. So where do we find success? Well, I would say this. I don't think it's a matter of setting our sights lower. We'll get off the no, it's setting them higher. You go back again to what Solomon said, and I think he started indicating right at the bat what it was that he was going to say to us ultimately. Verse 3. What do people gain from all of their labors at which they toil, what? Under the sun. Under the sun. So here's what he's saying. When your life is lived for the accomplishments of what's temporal, that's under the sun, that's all of this, and only for yourself, that is a frustrating, meaningless life. And so what do we do then? Well, I think we go higher than the ladder. We live our lives, if it's not for what's under the sun, we live it for what's what? Above the sun. Well, what's above the sun? Chapter 3, verse 11. This is what Solomon says. He, being God, has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. So Solomon begins at one point to shift a little bit to talk about not just what's under the sun, but what's over the sun. And he does it through the lenses and the framework of eternity. The fact that this life does not terminate on itself. There is more beyond this life. This is the fraction of the reality of all that exists. And he says, you and I have got to learn to live our lives for what's over the sun, not what's under the sun. For eternity, for what lasts, not for what rusts and what wastes away. We've got to actually pick our eyes up higher than even the ladder and say, hey, how do I let eternity frame what I'm doing right here and right now? And that doesn't mean in a weird way like we just kind of detach from this world. Where it's just like, all I ever think about is heaven. I just got to get to heaven. I don't care about this world. No. We live present to this world. We live in this world. We are a part of this world. We live to all the benefit around us of the people in this world, but we do so with the perspective of eternity being the lens we lay over the decisions we make here and we make right now. Going, some things are not making it with me to the other side. Some things are not going to matter in the end. Some things don't have the eternal reward, perspective, or existence that most of this world tells me does. And so we live for different purposes. So I would just give you two simple questions, because this is the whole series, in all honesty, is to say, all right, God, how do we do this? What matters most? Well, I would say week one, this is it, is that we live with an eternal perspective that this life doesn't end on itself. And even for some of you go, well, okay, but what's the big deal in the end? So what's the real harm if I just live my life for the latter? I mean, I'm not swinging the ladder around and hitting anybody with it. This is my ladder. This is how I'm going to accomplish it. Well, I'll tell you what the problem is. This thing lies. Because every time you get to one rung, you got to get to the next and the next and the next, and there is no success to be found and felt if that is the place you're trying to find it and feel it. Here's what you find and feel: stress, envy, anger, migraines, ulcers, IBS, betrayal, affairs, war, theft, depression, murder. All of that is a product of the lie of the ladder. So two questions that I think can help reorient in the moments that we're saying, okay, God, how do I live for above the sun instead of for the temporal below it? Even as I live in the temporal, how do I live for greater purposes? Well, question number one would simply be this, and it's a question of purpose. It's, what am I doing this for? What if you start asking yourself that every time you do anything? Whether it's you go to a soccer tournament, you go to your office, you buy something. Again, this isn't saying go be a hermit and have nothing. This isn't God saying don't enjoy the pleasures of life I've even given you. It's reframing it. Why am I doing this? One of my friends back home, he runs a trucking company. And he's taken this idea so much to heart that his commitment is, even as a trucking company, like he's going to lead that thing like a church. I've been to some of his year-end gatherings with his employees, whole room packed out, probably 200 employees sitting there. And that guy gets up there after his business guy does all the annual reporting. And my buddy John gets up there and he basically gives a church service. And he just tells people, hey, listen, here's who we are as a company. Here's why we give so much money away to organizations rescuing women and children out of human trafficking. And I know that all of you don't believe this, but here's what I believe about Jesus. And he just loves and serves and cares for his employees and his companies like he should as a follower of Jesus, like a pastor to them. And this is a guy that's gone, hey, everything I do is going to get passed through that lens. The stuff of this world will rust and turn to dust. How do I do it in a way that it matters? Why am I doing this? And the second and the last question would just be this one. Who am I doing it for? If the first is a question of perspective, this one's a question of person. Because it's too easy, and this is where I fall victim the most. It's just too easy to do everything we do for ourselves. I grew up in a family with 7 siblings. I was the oldest. My mom and my dad were both handicapped. God provided and God was good, but we struggled. And we did not have much of anything. And everything I had as a kid was a hand-me-down or worn out. And I have a part of me that has a hard time not doing what I do just to get from me. I am not naturally a very sharing person. My wife will tell you. I like my stuff and I like my things. And this is part of where God has to press into me a lot. Why am I doing what I'm doing? But specifically, who am I doing it for? Because it's really easy for Craig to do what Craig does for Craig. And so I've tried, even in some of my things, my hobbies, whether it's mountain biking or hunting, is to reframe those in the last couple of years to make sure that I'm doing those with more of a missional purpose. That I'm pulling people, friends, people who aren't following Jesus, I'm pulling them into that group and I'm reframing why I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for. That there would be greater purpose. There is a way that we can learn to climb down off the ladder and still live with the same things that the ladder provides, but live with a different perspective and live with a different set of values to ultimately live with a different success experience. But you got to ask yourself the right questions first. So their band makes their way out right now. I missed our cue for them to come out, so sorry guys, but they're on their way out at the moment. We're going to sing one last song. And the song, we're going to sing this line in there is, I just want you. Nothing else matters. I just want you. And so I just want to ask you as we go into this song this morning is to just give your heart an honest moment of evaluation with Jesus in the middle of this song. God, is that true for me? That all I want is really you? Because I know my heart any given day is plagued by a desire for so many other things than just him. So how about you? Because I'm sick and tired of my life being wrapped up and actually not really, there's too many days that my heart's not going, God, I just want you. It's going, no, I want all this. I really just want this stuff. And you, but this. I really want God to change something and continue to grow something in me enough that I go, I'll learn how to use this, but it's not what I want. Jesus, what I really want is you. So God, make our hearts, I pray, cry out for you in a way that maybe is new and fresh. And like David once said, as a deer that pants for water, it is the craving of our soul. That we would know you in a deeper way and the success of what life done for you, for what's over the sun, and to the benefit of others in this world looks like and feels like. In your name I pray. Amen.
I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. And take me back you've done is enough, Lord. You're all that we want. You're all that we need. Right here, we're in your presence. We are surrounded. Only you will do. Oh, I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you.
Would you stand with me? Solomon would conclude by the end that while the things of this life, if they're your pursuit, are meaningless, is that the Lord is everything. And he'd learned to live for above the sun, being that Jesus is what he wants more than anything. And then in that pursuit, it would reframe for him what I pray it reframes for us, what we do, why we do it, and who we do it for, but all because our primary pursuit to find joy, peace, satisfaction, and success is knowing intimately more and more the God who made us and adores us. And I pray that that's our pursuit as well. So Jesus, would you help that to be our reality as we move into this week? To not listen to, or to at least when we hear them, acknowledge the lie of the ladder and to start disagreeing with it. To set our sights higher than the ladder, but above the sun, as Solomon would say. That you truly would be what we just sang in an increasing measure in our lives, what we want more than anything else, Jesus. And in that place, teach us then how to do what we do and why we do it and who we do it for, the purposes that are more eternal than we tend to. And so God, in this week, would you walk with us closely and tenderly, be the whisper in our ear when the world is shouting. And it's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. So I just pray for you that as you go this week, you will acknowledge and understand when the ladder lies, and you will hear the voice of Jesus saying something different about above the sun, not the top of the ladder. We'll see you next Sunday.